You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur. Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, in which I conduct in-depth and revealing interviews of icons and those who I feel are the next generation icons of the weddings and event industry. And this is all to provide you with education and inspiration. So if you missed last week's episode, it was with a good friend of mine from the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area, Lauren Prattis, with Lauren Prattis Events. And today's guest is Eva Clark. Eva is the award-winning owner and creative director of Eva Clark Events, who plans and designs specializing in luxury destination weddings. She was named one of the best planners in America by Condé Nast Brides in 2019 and was named one of Atlanta's Women of Power and Influence by Modern Luxury magazine in 2016. Based out of Atlanta, she focuses on only 7 weddings per year. Her weddings have been published in numerous wedding publications, and she even had a wedding that was the backdrop for a music video of a chart-topping single. So enjoy my conversation with Eva Clark. Hey, Eva, it's so good to have you on the show. I know that we met at Engage in Banff some years ago.
Yeah, we did.
And that was one of my favorite ones. I'm going to say that out loud. That is absolute. That one, I think it was... I don't know if you remember, but I remember everyone talking about how chilled we all felt. And I think it was because we were just surrounded by mountains constantly. I think that's what it was.
I agree. And it was the kind of place that's so beautiful. You feel like you're on a movie set. And I think everyone was just feeling that, you know, just the crisp, cool air and the mountain surroundings. And it was just a really beautiful setting. So I'm with you. I would love to go back there for another Engage or just in general.
Yeah, I know. It was wonderful. So, you know, when I think about you, and of course I did some research, and I know that you were around 10 years old when the passion for weddings hit you. I think it was, I think you were at a wedding in Spain at a 17th century palace, right? That had turned into a hotel. Is that true? Do I have that right?
You do. Yeah. You know, I had a pretty modest upbringing. My parents were, you know, both middle-class workers, you know, great at their jobs and everything, but we didn't take lavish vacations. And so I feel like I need to preface that story by saying that that wasn't like the norm for me, just to like go off to old palaces on vacation.
Right.
But my grandparents loved Europe so much. It was just travel was so important to them. And every year of their adult lives, I think, they took a trip over to France or Italy or someplace beautiful. And it was my granddad's passion in life to take all of his grandkids to Europe. And so my brother and I had the opportunity to go when we were young. I was 10 and he was 12. And we spent the whole summer over there, just meandering through and then just happened upon this beautiful wedding one day that really just kind of changed my life in a way.
Do you remember like any specifics about the wedding that moved you so much?
Yeah, I think that, you know, being a girl from the country, like I literally lived on sand roads in North Florida and had a horse in my backyard. And my social activities, you know, were typically just something along the beach or in the county. I didn't see weddings and fancy events happening a whole lot. And so first of all, there's that, right? It's really alluring to see a beautiful event underway. And especially when you feel like you're just sort of a secret viewer, as I was at the time. But specifically what really grabbed me was just the lace. I remember the bride's dress and the veil, and it was like the most beautiful lace I'd ever seen. I also remember, it's going to sound funny, but I remember sangria, and I had never seen that before. And I was like, oh my God, they put fruit in a cup, and like a beautiful cup. And, you know, can I have some of that? And it was just so authentic to the area. And of course, there was just great music and just love. And I was just enamored by the whole scene.
Wow. So did this affect you in any way during high school, college? I mean, were you, you know, running any kind of events for sorority or whatever, anything like that?
No. I think that, you know, in high school, I was just trying to get through high school. And I always had an interest in design and making things pretty, like in my home and in my surroundings. Things like that matter to me. And in college, I honed in on that a bit more. not so much with the formal organization because I was married for part of my college experience, but just like getting to know who I am and working on my talents there when it came to art and art history and design. And then, during that period, I also had an opportunity to start coordinating weddings for the church that I belonged to, which was a very old, beautiful, historic church in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, I was just in Portland. It's beautiful. So how then did you get to, have your own business as an entrepreneur, as an event planner, producer? How did you get to that point?
Yeah. So I feel like so many people in the event industry, it was not a direct route. I wasn't a child that said, I want to be a wedding planner when I grow up. In fact, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be. And for a while, I thought I might get into law because I was good at, forming an argument, I guess I was told. But essentially, it kind of happened in an organic way. When I graduated from college, I got hired on by a university hospital in Portland and started helping with special events there, fundraising for the neurosciences. And my boss and colleagues recognized my talent and would say things to me like, why aren't you doing this like for a living? And after a while, I thought to myself, well, maybe I should. And at the time, I had one daughter and she was 5 years old and she was in kindergarten. And I wanted to have another baby. And I knew that to be the kind of mom I wanted to be, I didn't want to have to put that baby in childcare 50 hours a week to sustain the job that I had, even though it was secure, right? It was a 40-hour-a-week job with benefits and all the things. Ultimately, it just came down to a conversation with my husband where I said, I'm ready to take the leap here and would really love it if you would support me. I really want to do this. I feel like it's kind of what I've made to do. And that conversation didn't go well at first.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, he was just nervous, I was raised by an entrepreneur. My dad owned his own business and I felt comfortable in that. On the other hand, he hadn't, and he just thought this is risky, right? And
right.
It also put him in the position of being the person to pay the bills for a bit until things really kind of took off.
That's scary too. Yeah, have that pressure.
Yeah, it's valid. But what ended up happening was as soon as I started the business, it really kind of took off and beautiful things started to happen. And it wasn't a piece of cake, but the universe was definitely telling me that I was on the right path.
I love that. I fully believe that too. Just to really, I think the more energy that we put out and positiveness and all of that. I mean, I do believe it comes back to us in so many ways, we may not understand till later. Well, there's a wonderful quote in your website that says, that I'd like to ask you about. And it says, I want the couple to feel that their wedding is a true expression of who they are, so that their story is the essence of the event. I want their guests to know precisely whose wedding they are at, from their first impression upon arrival to the send-off. There are no cookie-cutter events here. So, Eva, how do you generally accomplish that? I mean, is there a certain kind of a process that you follow? How do you figure that out with a couple?
Yeah. So, I think if I were to throw, $200,000 in an event and ask someone to plan it for me, I would really want for that person to turn that event into something that spoke to who I was, whether it was a wedding or an anniversary party or a birthday party. At the end of the day, it is such a personal thing. And weddings, at the root are based in love and they're based in who that couple is and what their experience has been together and where they've lived. The things that make them laugh and cry together, vacations they've taken, and even like kind of what they want their future to be together. And I really want that all to come through. And I want for the couple to get the feeling that I know them and that the event in the end is going to be something that not only they're happy with, but that, guests are just like, God, that was like the best event ever. And it was just so Katie and Josh, for instance, because what I don't like to happen is to walk into a venue, and I see it all the time, Andy, like, I'll be cruising through the country club in my neighborhood and there'll be some random sign outside, like Miller Smith wedding, yada, yada, yada. And you kind of walk in and it's like, it looks the same as the last wedding you saw there. Maybe the linen color's a little different. But there's just not much expression and the details aren't there. And so that's what I don't want to do. What I want to do is bring through those details in a really beautiful way that's organic and doesn't seem cheesy. For instance, if they're having a coastal wedding, it's not like we're going to have seashells everywhere. But, I think that it needs to be representative of who they are.
It's interesting. While you were saying this to me, you also mentioned that you also want to know how they see their future together, which I haven't heard before. That's really interesting to me. I mean, I would think that it would evoke a certain kind of an answer, with emotion, when you ask that kind of a question, when you talk to couples about that, about what do you see your future to be like? I think that's a really interesting topic.
Yeah, I think I agree. And, it's kind of the thing that's pretty easy for me to pick up on. I'm a pretty empathic learner, and it's easy for me to hone in on the fact that one couple may have very strong family roots and, they can't wait to start a family of their own, and they can't wait to go on vacation with their parents and their siblings and for their children and their siblings' children to hang out. There's that feeling and that energy that's very family centric. On the other hand, I may have another couple who can't stop talking about their honeymoon, and for them, I see them, traveling as long as they can to just really exotic places and just kind of continuing with that. And so, again, it's about kind of getting into their personal identity.
Yeah. Well, and the quote goes on to say, we are all about anticipating the guests' needs and evoking their senses in an unforgettable manner. It's interesting. There's so many different ways to try to do that, to try to accomplish that. Can you give maybe an example from a wedding that you've done in terms of, again, that anticipating the guest needs and then evoking their senses?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so like on a most basic level, if we're having a wedding in the mountains and it's chilly, I'm going to make sure that we have a basket of freshly laundered throws that the women can wrap around their arms.
Yeah. Right.
Or that we're going to have a fire source nearby. On the other hand, if we're somewhere in the Southeast and it's an outdoor event, I'm going to make sure we have a shit ton of bug spray nearby.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't think of that. I thought of that for hiking and camping, but not for a party. I mean, that's a great idea. Right.
Yeah. So it's just those kind of things, like what would make me feel comfortable, and then just expanding that and ordering enough quantity to make sure that we have enough to keep people comfortable. But beyond that, it gets into like the more subtle things, like playing up on where they're at. Like if it's a mountain venue, I would really love a setting where we can have a roaring fireplace going, but at the same time have a couple of open windows so that the fresh mountain air can come through. Or, at the beach, some fresh seafood so they feel like they're experiencing what that area is truly about. Like if you're in an area where they have the greatest oysters, wouldn't it be awesome to have freshly shucked oysters at the event? So just kind of those immersive experiences that delight all the senses for the guests.
Also, I know that you had a wedding that was chosen as the backdrop for a really major music video of a chart-topping single. It was Sweet Annie by the Zac Brown Band. I mean, huge in country and even country pop. Can you tell me about that? How did that come to be? And I watched it, Eva. It was really cool to watch it and know that this was your creation.
Yeah.
How'd that come to be?
So, thank you. It was really quite an experience, and one that I really didn't see coming. I guess at the root of it, when our family moved to Georgia in 2010, we'd been living in Portland. My youngest daughter was in preschool with Zac Brown's daughter, and they became very good friends. And as funny as it may sound, one of my first play dates in Georgia was at their home. And the whole thing was kind of surreal in the beginning, but ultimately we just became friends. And there wasn't any moment where I was like, oh, he's such a celebrity. At the time, he wasn't as big as he is now, but he was important. So his wife and I became good friends. Our daughters got together a good bit. And when one of the team members, Coy Bowles, was planning his wedding, she reached out to me and asked if I'd like to be a part of it. And their home is about 20 minutes from where I live. And the time we were planning the wedding, just like on an open field, which is the land that's an extension of their home, which is now where the camp is, Camp Southern Ground that Zach opened a few years ago. But at the time, it was just raw land, and we were working with big trees, and we were trying to get snakes out of the way, and figuring out how to get 18-wheelers down to the space where we wanted to do the stage, and then another 18-wheeler because they wanted to bring Cookie in to feed the people. So it was really like so unusual, and it challenged me greatly at the time. Like I was just like, okay, I'm a wedding planner. I'm not really behind the scenes on many concerts. So it was definitely a huge challenge. And a lot of the creative design or inspiration came from the bride. And she had a really great design eye and knew exactly what kind of look and feel that she wanted. And I was following her lead on many of the cues, and then following Coy's lead on things like entertainment and food, because that seemed to be kind of his specialty.
Mm. Well, and there was a great shot. I remember when I was watching the video of her, I don't know if it was just strictly for the video or part of the wedding, but where she was in the back of a truck with some friends and, just laughing and smiling and, looking amazing. And I remember that shot in particular, that was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, I wanted to ask you in one of your blogs, Ask Eva, which I recommend everyone check out. It's wonderful. You suggest, I thought this was interesting, Eva. You suggest interviewing another planner because, as you say, quote, I am not always the perfect fit for every couple. And I thought that was really gutsy to put that out there. At the same time, it really is powerful. It's really powerful to just say that, it elevates, you in a sense. I mean, how did you come to do that? I'm not always the perfect fit for every couple.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of altruism there. And there's also a little protection in it for me. Over the course of 18 years, I've become hitched to some wagons that I would rather not be hitched to.
Right. And I think we all can say that.
Yeah. And it's over the past 5 to 7 years in particular, I've gotten to the point in my career where I can cherry pick a bit. And I know that that's a blessing. And Lord knows I worked so hard to get here. But, obviously for me, someone who wouldn't be a good fit would be someone who wants to micromanage or wants to have their wedding plan within 3 months, even though it's actually 18 months out, or someone who doesn't, trust the design process. And that's just from the start, something I try to pick up on, like what kind of client are you going to be? And in return, am I going to be the best fit for you? For instance, I won't be able to plan your wedding in the first 6 weeks completely. And that isn't really even a good idea because in the infancy of the planning, I'm not going to know enough about you to make all those moves on your behalf. And in some cases, we're still figuring out the budget, 6 weeks in. So I just know that when I think about, I've never added it up, but when I think about all of the emails and texts and phone calls that go into planning one wedding, it's a lot. And I get to know these people really well. And in some cases, we deal with some really difficult things along the way. I had a bride one time that had to enter rehab during the planning. And I've had a mother of the bride who underwent treatment for breast cancer during the planning. And these are all experiences that I'm going through with them, and I'm happy to do that. It's an honor. But I just feel like it's so, so important before you embark on like the next 12 months or even 2 years of your life and planning to make sure that you're doing it with somebody who you can relate to, who you trust, and who you ultimately know is going to, bring your wedding to life in the way that you'd like to see it done.
I think a lot of newer planners, producers feel in the beginning that they've got to take everything. They've got to take every job. And I do believe that, if they find a couple that they just don't vibe with, and they don't take that particular job and they leave it open, I believe it'll be filled up more often than not. It's going to be filled with the right couple.
I agree. And I feel like, I struggled with this for years, but now I really try to just be super transparent up front with people and do more expectation setting than I did in the past. And, ultimately I want them to have the best experience possible. And, any client that I take on, whether I like them or not, I'm going to work really hard for them. And, I want to know at the end of the day that my work is going to be valued and the work of my team, and the people that I, bring on board. So yeah, I fully believe that. And I actually say that to just about everyone I talk to, as we're starting, the interview process, just if you haven't done so already, check out a couple of other planners and, get them on the phone.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do that. I do that sometimes. I'm in the band business, and I'll do that. I mean, I'm really confident with the products that I have, super confident. And obviously, it's more than just the band. It's the service all around it. And I also will sometimes say to people, yeah, please be sure that you look at a lot of bands, because I know then they're going to be able to see the difference more. And it's the same thing, that we're the right fit for them. I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. In another blog, you had said that you would be bored if you orchestrated events at the same venues over and over. And so you really love to travel, and that with new venues, comes fresh eyes and enthusiasm. I love that part of the blog when you said that with a new venue, you're gonna come at it with a different perspective, and I know that you do a lot of destination weddings, don't you? I believe
I do, mostly nowadays.
Wow. There's also the overwhelming part of it too, to me. If I'm a planner or producer, when you're going to a brand new venue, let's say potentially in a new country that you haven't been to yet, it just seems, do you feel a lot of pressure? It just seems like so much that you've got to deal with to work that out.
Yeah, I know that it's not meant for everyone. There are planners who are really good at doing a St. Regis wedding every other weekend, throughout the year, and they're very happy with that. For me, because I'm just such a travel enthusiast, and because ultimately, Europe is just in my heart in so many ways, I'm always looking for an opportunity to travel and to check out a beautiful place that I haven't been before, or even to return to a place that I've been before and do something unique for a new couple. But what that means for me is that it's a challenge. And yes, it's a challenge, especially when there's a language barrier. But I love it. And the way I go about doing it is just doing more research on the front end. I wouldn't dream of cruising into a wedding where I hadn't stepped foot at the venue and I hadn't gotten to know the people there and didn't know the nuances or the weather patterns, and that sort of thing about the venue, how the lighting system works and who they value in terms of some creatives that I could bring on board locally. So I just do a lot more research on the front end. And in most cases, that involves a site visit. It isn't always at the beginning of the planning. Sometimes it's, closer to the end. But one of the things that helps me do my job well when it comes to that is I just have a really expansive list of people who are global partners that I can reach out to. both people who I've worked with in the past and also travel experts. There are travel concierges that I work with on a regular basis, and people who work for hotels and resorts who have ended up being a great resource for me. So when I start the process of planning in the beginning, it's a little daunting, but I just start reaching out to the obvious people, or start working with the low-hanging fruit, and then go from there.
What do you do if you run into a language barrier?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I speak French. I took French in high school and college, and then when I orchestrated a wedding in France a few years ago, I actually brought on a tutor. I was doing like weekly tutoring with someone who speaks French here in my community, and that was really helpful. And in places where I don't speak the language, like right now, I'm currently working on learning more Italian, and it's so hard.
Wow.
They have so many syllables in their words. It's like, our words seem so simple, and really the French version also seems simple. And so I kind of sound like an idiot when I'm trying to speak Italian, like, because I know not to speak English, so I'll say something and it may come out in French. And then I'll say that's not right, and then they'll be like, "Oh, you're speaking Spanish now," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well,
that's funny.
Let me start over."
Yeah.
But that said, I never want to be that American planner who shows up in a place like Italy and expects everyone to speak English.
Right.
That's so arrogant, and I know at the end of the day, I'm just not going to have a successful event if I go in there just expecting everyone to speak my language. And I'm certainly not going to leave with much respect on their end.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say that. When I was 23, I went to Paris by myself, and I stayed with some people, some friends of friends there, and they explained to me right from the beginning, because I was going to spend a lot of the time out by myself exploring the city, and they said, be sure to approach people in French, because otherwise, even if they know English, if you just go up to them and say, where's the Louvre, and assuming they know English, they're going to pretend like that. So I learned, je ne parle pas français, parlez-vous anglais? I learned. And so whenever I travel anywhere, I learn how to say, I don't speak your language. I say it in their language. Do you speak English? And I always get great response.
Yes. And most people, as you've probably experienced, will switch over. Like, they take pity on you and they're like, "Oh, bless your heart. let me speak, English to you." But you can't count on that. And that's especially true when you get into places that are off the beaten path, like the smaller towns in France and Italy. Like for this last wedding I did in Italy a couple of weeks ago, I brought on two multilingual coordinators who lived in Italy and spoke both Italian and English. And to me, that was vital for the reasons we just mentioned, but especially for like the moments where it's like 1 a.m. and we're loading guests on the shuttles. And sure, the shuttle driver has an itinerary and, addresses of places there's to take people. But if an American person gets on board and doesn't know how to say that to the driver, or doesn't know how to communicate a need that they have to the driver, then we have a problem, right? Because how is that going to be handled? And so to me, it's very important to have someone there who speaks a language and can clearly communicate things, just to take care of the guests and make sure that the guest and vendor experience is a good one.
Before we leave this topic of destination weddings, I'm also wondering, I figure there must be so many challenges. What is like one of the biggest ones that you ran into, and how did you overcome it? Like a potential disaster. There's got to be with any wedding you've got them, but especially destination.
There's so many. Do you have time for two?
Sure.
Make it quick. Okay.
Let's do it.
There's so many, but one of the ones that happened last summer just comes to mind so readily because it was a wedding that had already been postponed due to COVID, and it took place in August in Aspen, Colorado. Originally, the wedding was supposed to be a big blowout ballroom wedding at the St. Regis in Miami, and the bride and groom decided to pivot to an intimate wedding at Hotel Jerome in Aspen, and they narrowed their guest list down to 50, which was very hard to do, as you can imagine. But in the midst of planning that event, and as a side note, I only had 74 days to completely replan it.
Oh my gosh.
Before it came about. things were just intense. And like I had to just go into tunnel vision mode, just to wake up every day and make things happen. And which was so hard because at the time, a lot of people weren't working or they weren't really sure what their comfort level was going to be with doing this wedding with me. And, there were still contracts to be negotiated and a great amount of work to be done. But just before we were getting ready to go to Aspen for the wedding, wildfires broke out nearby. And it just felt surreal, Andy, because I was suddenly like having conversations with the client about how could we get my team in if my flight can't make it to the airport? And like, do we have a helicopter? Do we have a private plane?
Oh, geez.
And it was one of those situations where ultimately everyone made it, but it was not easy. Like some of the vendor team had to be rerouted and they ended up with like a 10-hour drive that they didn't anticipate because certain roads were closed around the mountains. And so that was like just really hard.
I can't imagine what you went through.
It was like, and in the midst of all that too, Andy, we were like, well, we think it's going to happen because every week the county, Pitkin County was like releasing new reports on whether or not they'd be open and whether or not they were still doing events with up to 50 people. And so that was just probably the most insane example I have to offer of just, doing something, but it was just made a lot harder by the pandemic and then wildfires.
Oh my gosh. Right. And then you had a second one too?
Yeah. So another one, and this one was actually just down the road from me here in Georgia, a really beautiful venue that was once a train station way back when. It's just this beautiful farm. It's privately owned. A river runs through it. It's just so beautiful. And I had a fall wedding there, and it was a place that I hadn't done a wedding before. I'd done a site visit. Everything went smoothly for that. But on the wedding day, things were rocking along pretty well until I got a call from the florist who said that she'd gotten a flat tire on the way and she was going to be late. And I just knew that as soon as I got the bride and groom down the aisle for the ceremony, I was really going to have to hustle myself to help her out and that my team was going to have to. So ceremony's underway and it's probably about 50 yards from this house where I'm basically hanging out and helping the florist take arrangements out to the tables for the reception. And it's just one of those moments, I'm sure you've been there, where it's just like grab and go, whatever we have to do, everyone's rolling up their sleeves to help out. Even the DJ nearby was like, what can I do to help? They just saw that, we were struggling a bit. So I had 2 vases of flowers in my hands and I was bopping out the back door and I walked out onto this patio where it was just kind of like a little walkway to get to where the tables were for dinner. And as I looked down, as I was taking the second step, there was a 5-foot long snake under my feet.
Oh no. I have a thing about snakes. So, okay. Yeah.
Well, again, because I grew up in the country, like it wasn't my first snake encounter. However, here I was, wearing some heels and trying to like keep my composure. And I said, shit, really loudly, like just, and I had no control over it. It was just like, like I literally almost stepped on this giant snake while I was holding something fragile in my hands.
Barely hear this. Okay.
And my first thought is, oh God, like, I hope no one at the ceremony heard me say that. I was far enough away that I was pretty confident no one heard me. And anyway, there was a guy, though, that was hanging out on the patio with his 2-year-old daughter. I think she was getting kind of restless during the ceremony. And he looked at me like, do you mind? But then quickly saw that my face had gone white and then saw the snake at my feet and was like, oh crap, like grabbed his daughter, ran off. I'm like, okay, so I'm on my own here.
God.
So,
okay.
Andy, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I don't even know where they keep the broom at this place, let alone like a hoe or a shovel, because my thought is the snake needs to go. Like, this can't happen. Like, we can't continue setup and we can't have guests that are like, running away from a giant snake. And it was big. It was a very big snake. And so what happens next was just that I proceeded to like walk away from the snake for a minute and whisper scream, to the people near me who were still setting up, like the bartender and the DJ. The florist wasn't out there yet. My team wasn't there. And was just like, there's a snake kind of a thing,
Yeah, right.
pointing and, all the things, trying to be quiet enough so that we don't disrupt the ceremony, but also like alarming people that, there's a giant snake now that we have to account for in the midst of this like chaos. So, I couldn't get the attention of the bartender, and she was setting up glasses on the bar that was like a U-shaped bar. And of course, like the snake slithers up behind her and she's like trapped in the U.
Oh, jeez. Oh my
like,
gosh.
Get out. Like she climbs on the table. Anyway, we're doing all this, just like, trying to figure out what we're going to do. And I'm just like racking my brain. I'm like, even in my car, I don't even know what I could use to lift and get rid of the snake, kind of thing. So the DJ came over and he was like, what can I do? Like, I'll get it for you. And he and another guy ended up like corralling the snake. And he came up to me and he was like, what do you want me to do with it? I was like, you really have to
just
ask me that?
Get the hell out of here. Yeah.
Like, just, go. Like, and he was like, okay, yes, ma'am. Like, so before the ceremony ended, the snake was gone. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know what he did. I never asked for confirmation, but it was just definitely one of those moments of just like grace under pressure, but also just, I know what to do. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'll figure it out.
Right. Well, it's assuming right from the start that no matter what happens, there is a solution. It makes such a huge difference, to not be reactive. And I think it really helps to find something. I also want to, there's one last topic I want to talk with you about, Eva, is balance between personal life, business life. And you had told me earlier, and you mentioned it's okay if I bring it up, a really, rough story. I believe it was that a year after starting your business, you lost a baby boy when you were 5 months pregnant. And I can't even imagine, but I assume it profoundly affected you, right? And how you run your business, how you run your life. How did that affect you today in terms of balance? And what did you do?
Yeah, it broke my heart, just broke my heart. Like when, even though I didn't grow up saying I wanted to be a wedding planner, I absolutely grew up saying, I can't wait to be a mom. And our decision to have another child just thrilled me. And I was so excited to be pregnant again and just had no warning signs that anything was wrong. And I was in for a routine checkup when they told me that they couldn't find a heartbeat. And as I mentioned to you, there were days following that where I didn't know if I wanted to live. And it was just a very deep struggle for me, just to continue on to be the mom to my daughter, wife to my husband. And, I struggled spiritually, and I struggled with myself. I felt like my body had let me down, and I wondered if I'd ever be able to have another healthy baby, even though I had one.
Yeah.
And it was just the darkest part of my life, essentially. And in the midst of that, because my business had really taken off, I had clients that were counting on me to execute things for them. And it was probably a good thing, that I had something to turn my attention to. But I can't really say exactly how I got through it. It took a lot of prayer and just, loving on my family and everything. But it definitely shaped who I was from that day forward. I like to think that I see people for who they are. I like to think that I'm more authentic myself, that I see people in their pain, having been through something like that myself. And at the end of the day, I just don't sweat the little things the way I did before that. When I'm sitting in a vendor meeting or, a detailing meeting and we're talking about the menu, sometimes we sit there and talk about chicken for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh my God, we're still talking about fucking chicken.
Right.
Right. Not that it bothers me, but it's like, I guess what I'm saying is my focus is on important things.
Yeah.
And the important things to me are the relationships in my life and what I'm doing to make this world a better place and what I'm doing to make this world a better place for my daughters who I'm raising right now. You know, I have 3 daughters and they're just wonderful people and mean more to me than anything. And, you know, nothing beyond my family matters, really. And so it just softened me, but also strengthened me, if that makes sense. And I think that in many ways, it has made me better at what I do because I'm good at focusing on the things that matter and good at talking people off a ledge when they're starting to get worked up over trivial things.
Yeah, you know, when you're telling me this, I mean, I had a big tragedy when I was really young. I lost a brother tragically, and my mother talks about this mentor she had at that time who helped her get through, along with my father. But she talked about how he had said it's like there's this big steel spring, and these kinds of tragedies just smash it down, push it way down, but then it bounces back even higher than before because of this. Like you're talking about, just surviving, you know, any kind of massive challenges like this, and still being able to not only survive it but thrive, you know, and learn from it. And I do think it really deepens a sense of empathy, not just sympathy, but empathy. And I mean, I appreciate you sharing this story. It's very vulnerable, and it does say a lot about who you are. And you know, I appreciate you sharing this. Thank
you, Andy. And I don't share it often, but I appreciate that you ask people these kind of questions when you're conducting interviews. And I really appreciate seeing the whole picture of people and hope that, you know, in sharing my own, that will just continue. At the end of the day, we're all just humans, you know, trying to get by, especially this year. And I think that those stories matter. And I'm sorry that you had a similar loss. It's just, it's not something you want anyone to have to go through, but all we can do really is just make the best of it.
Yeah. Well, before we go, one last question. I believe that you offer design consulting services. Is that right?
I do. Yeah. So I've just started to do this just based on demand. This past year, there just isn't enough of me to go around, and so many people who had to postpone during 2020 are looking to book, and you know, this year still in 2022. And I just I'm unable to help them with the actual events, but decided that I would do some consulting on an hourly basis. And so I've started doing that, and it's going really well. And I think I'm going to continue to do it at least until we get to a point where maybe some of that stabilizes, some of the shift stabilizes.
Yeah. Well, we'll have basic contact information in the show notes, but for design consulting services, what is the best way for people to reach you?
Messaging on Instagram is fine, as well as my email, which is hello@evaclarkevents.com.
Great. Okay. Well, Eva, this has been really nice getting to know you more. It's been so long since we saw each other in person. It's so nice to reconnect like this. So thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving me your time.
Thank you, Andy. I really feel like it's an honor to be part of your podcast. I'm a huge fan, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for saying that. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Eva Clark. Be sure to check out her website at evaclarkevents.com. You can find her on Instagram at Eva Clark Events and also on Twitter at Eva Clark Events. And be sure to check out our show notes at the website of theweddingbiz.com. And we ask that you subscribe so you never miss an episode, and also give a top review and rating wherever you get your podcast so that other people like yourself can find the show. And finally, I want to mention next week's upcoming guest. It is a revisit of my original interview of Mindy Weiss. So we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.